In this video, I'm going to be doing a editing breakdown of a social piece of content that I made for ACL Music Fest this past weekend. I'm going to break it down into 10 tips, tricks, or concepts that I was thinking about while creating this piece of content, and hopefully those can help you in your social pieces of content in the future. I'm going to play it right now, and then we'll get back into it. Hopefully you enjoyed that little piece of content because we're going to be breaking it down for the remainder of this video. Let's start with concept number 1, which I think is the most important and what you should probably be thinking about with any piece of content that you do. And that is, what is the story? You may think that this is a random compilation of clips, but I really think about the pacing and what is shown to the viewer throughout the piece. And one thing you should know is a lot of this kind of content is shot, edited, and released on the same day. So if you have those tight turnarounds, you need to have in your mind what kind of shots you need to get and where they'll fall in the piece in order to create a piece in a timely manner. So let's take a look at some of these clips and the structure in which I placed them. One thing you may have noticed with the cut is that I didn't really feature too much of the musical acts playing at ACL Festival, and that's because over the course of the weekend, I was tasked with filming more the fans attending the festival and featuring them. So a lot of this piece is structured around the fans' experience at the festival. A typical story structure in my mind is an introduction, rising action, climax, some falling action, and then basically like an outro or ending, a conclusion. Let's start with an introduction. And here, all of these orange clips represent that to me. I need to introduce you to what this piece of content is. In my mind, that's an establishing shot of the music festival. So these first couple shots, like this one right here, this isn't in the actual venue yet, it's the line going in. Just from the beginning, we're starting outside the venue, going into the action. These are people, they're hyped. There's the ACL Music Fest sign right there. We get signage, we get branding. You get it, you're at ACL Music Festival. Now we need to see some fans kind of enjoying themselves like out in the middle of the ground. Intentionally, I have not shown you people enjoying the music itself because I think that's kind of the beef of the cut. So here's more people posing, and I would still consider this an introduction to the viewer. This is things that are outlying outside the actual music, people painting, and then right here, I get to a hyperlapse of one of the venues. Now notice, this whole section is still, people are enjoying the music, but I'm not focused in on a specific person. This is more a wide view of what's going on. All of these red clips here, I see as rising action on that whole graph of a storyline. More hyperlapses, this is building. Then right here is the first shot, I'll play it, of a person, it's an artist dancing, it's a stage, it is the actual music being enjoyed and performed. I think that this purple section is the climax of the video, and it's done with this speed ramping. I'll play it one more time. It all builds up to this one moment of this guy jumping up. I thought it was a really cool shot. I remember when I got this shot, I was like, yep, that's the turning point in the video. When I'm doing my edit, now I can go get shots of the crowd. So orange, introduction, red, these hyperlapses are too wide angle and you can't really focus in. It's just building action, building action, building action, or rising action. Then it hits the purple, guy jumps up, hits this sweet pose, and then we're off to the races on what would be considered to me like sustained action after the climax, or kind of like a falling action. All of these blue clips are now people enjoying the festival, really focused in on individuals, dancing, waving to the camera, vibing. If I was earlier in my career, I probably would have started with these kind of shots and then maybe sprinkled in a time lapse and maybe some ACL Music Fest signs in there, not following any kind of rules. And not to say that you don't have to do this, but I do think it really helps in the overall arching swell and emotion of your piece. Finally, at the end of the structure, we have this conclusion where this person is right in front of the stage. They're doing, this guy's holding her up with his legs. Another thing is to always ask people, like, before you start filming them. Like, I went up to this lady like, hey, do you mind if I like get this shot of you doing like this acrobatic stuff? She's like, yeah. And I thought it was really cool. And this guy walked in front of my camera and I pulled focus to the ACL Music Fest sign. Again, ending with branding. I would say that this is a conclusion to what's going on. So number one is story. Always be thinking about the story in your structure of your edit when creating, editing, and posting. Let's get to the second concept I want to talk about. And I think in order of importance, this falls right underneath your story if it is something that you would include in your piece of content, and that's the music. And the reason I say this is because the way that the music builds and swells and then concludes also goes in tandem or parallel with your storied structure. The music will build when your visuals build. The music will climax when your visuals climax, and then it will go down when your visuals have that sustained action in the conclusion. And you can even see this physically in the waveforms of my timeline. If you look at the audio waveforms in the introduction, the waveforms are a little bit smaller than the climax and rising action right here. If I play it back, there might have been like some claps there, but there was no like driving drum beat or anything like that. This is just an introduction. One thing that I like to do when creating a piece like this is not repeat the same idea twice. If you were to listen back to the entire cut, every single time I've established a musical idea, I immediately go to the next section of music. Typically, when you're looking for stock music, what they'll do is they'll repeat the same idea twice. I think this helps because it just gives the artist a much longer cut. So if we listen to this music right here, see, they repeated it twice. There's a little bit of variation there, but not enough for me to have my story progress. You have to be so quick on social. If you've repeated the same musical idea twice, I think it just leads to losing your viewer. What I would do in an edit like this is maybe grab some of this beginning part, which is what I did over here, and that's just like a musical swell. I have this first section right here going immediately into the buildup where there is drums. So I would say that this is one of the busiest parts of the music, but it's also one of the busiest visually because I have all of these time lapses and hyperlapses going on the screen. And it's really building up all of that action. During that drum fill is my climax, and the beat is going to drop. If you're at an EDM concert or anything like that and you hear that drum fill, this is the part where you're like, you're in the crowd and you're like, yeah, man, yeah, yeah. And then right when that drop happens, that's when the headbanging starts happening and you start really grooving to the music and vibing, right? So the same thing is apparent in my music to my storied structure. Right when the drop happens and people are gonna be vibing to that music, I have those visuals on the screen. Just as a side note, I got this music from artlist.io. I think they have a fantastic library. This video isn't sponsored by them. I just find in general that I'm able to find a high caliber quality song for my content on Artlist far quicker than a lot of the other music services. I'm also subscribed to Epidemic Sound, which I am using some of their sound effects in here. I'll have links to both the websites in my description. They'll be affiliates. I do stand by both Artlist and Epidemic though. They have some great libraries to pull from. There's some other things that I could maybe talk about with the music in terms of specific cuts, but if you just walk away from this piece of content knowing that in your next video that you create and you have music in the background, be thinking, am I repeating the same musical idea too much? And would it be better for me to, one, find a different piece of music, or two, splice this up in a way that it helps complement the story I'm looking to tell in a quick enough manner for social media. For concept number 3, since we're already talking about audio, let's get into sound effects and why I think you should be incorporating them into your social edits. Let me show you rather than tell you why I think sound effects elevate this video. I'm just gonna play the first 10 seconds with just the music. Now, let me add in the sound effects. And just for kickers, I think this could just work without any music. If you want to hear that, here's that same clip. The fact that the edit can stand by itself with just sound effects, in my opinion, speaks volumes to how much more they accentuate your edit by having them in there. Now let's get into some specific effects that I'm pulling off in this edit. For number 4, we'll look at time remapping. And if you look in particular, I'm using time remapping almost on every single clip. And there's some different methods that you could go about doing this. For reference, here it is. He jumps, they do the thing. And back over here, I have that same shot, uncolored and everything. So here's the original shot of him just jumping. And here's a couple ways to do this. If you want to just make this slow motion, I know that I shot this in 120 frames per second. I have a whole video on how to shoot for slow-mo, and I also have a cheat sheet for how to do the settings on your camera / what percentage you can slow down to inside Premiere Pro. I'm not gonna get into that because it's a pretty in-depth video. I'll link that video here and also in the description. If I right click here, go to speed duration, right here, I can go down to 20% without having any frames replicated. So if I just wanna have this on the timeline, hit okay, this is just straight up slow motion. And that's one way to do the time remapping. That looks so cool in slow motion. Another way to do this is, let me undo my action. And let's say I want him to be fast motion. So he starts out fast and then abruptly hits slow motion at the peak. So it'd be bam, like maybe about right there. So I'm gonna create a cut. So you could use the razor tool, but I like the action of add edit. So for normal users, that's Command K, but for me and my hotkeys, I use F. This next part, I'm going to now hit Command R and make that 20%. So now it will abruptly hit slow-mo right at that point. So imagine the music's like, bam. And then maybe as he hits this spot right here, we go back to fast motion. So boom, bam. That's pretty cool, right? Let's take this a step further and do some actual time remapping here so it gradually goes slower and faster. To do this, we're gonna hone in on this little effect symbol and we're gonna right click and scroll on down to time remapping speed. This will bring up this little bar right here. And now I can hold Command on Mac or Control on Windows to add a little plus sign. Before I make these adjustments though, I wanna see where I want it to be slowest. So at the pinnacle, maybe it's slowing down as he's going up and then we hit complete slow motion right here. So with that in mind, let me zoom in just a smidge so you can see. Make this bigger. I'm gonna hold Command, create my keyframe right here. And then where do I want this to speed back up? Maybe about right there. Make another keyframe. And here is where we do our adjustments gradually. So if I just hit play, it's still gonna be fast motion, but I can take these little flags and start to drag them out. So here is where all of the speeding up or slowing down will occur. If I want to go down to slow-mo, which is right here, I'll click and drag this line down. So I'm gonna go down to 20%, right there. And let's just see what this looks like. Another thing is to click right here in this negative space to bring up these handles, and I'm going to go down like that and make it a exponential curve. So the other thing is with the music, I need this to happen faster. So I'm actually gonna go faster than normal motion. Let's just have it be something like 180, see what we get. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Now let's go over to about right here, and we need this to speed back up. So I'm gonna click and drag out, maybe make that a little bit more gradual. And we'll go back up to 180 on the end, like so. Click, and we'll make this an exponential curve. So now we are ending up with an example like this. Vroom, wham. That is pretty tight, right? That's pretty cool. That's the extent of time remapping. I'm not gonna show you how I did every single example. I think once I show you how to do it once, you get the concept. Let's move on to the next one. Keeping with the effects, tip number 5 is to use objects wiping across the screen to help transition to the next shot. So right here, I have 3 examples of that. We have these girls on frame, and as they wipe across, this person right here covers my whole frame, and I'm actually wiping that on with the guy doing the spray paint. Another version of this is right here where this kid is dancing, and a guy walked in front of my camera right here, and it's all right because I used him to wipe to this next shot. And a final example of that is right here. We have the hands, and a hand actually goes like this across the frame, and I use that to wipe to this shot. So I'm gonna use this last as my example to show you how to do this. Here is that same shot, and that is the hand wiping across the screen. Very easy to do something like this. The first thing I'm gonna do is go down here to my select zoom level and just zoom out to maybe 25%. Go to the last frame right here, go to my opacity, grab the free draw Bezier, or just that pen tool underneath the opacity for the clip, and I'm going to draw a mask around right here. I'll go to the mask path and toggle on animation. Next, we'll go 1 frame up, like so, and you just follow whatever your object is, and you just continue this process until you've created your wipe. That was maybe about 5 keyframes, and I just go along, and that is how you do a wipe. And that might work, but for me, the edge is a little too hard. So I'm going to click my toggle animation on for my feather and go from 0 to this one right here. And let's do something like 100, see what 100 does. 100 looks pretty good. So now that makes it a little bit more blurry as I wipe to the next shot. For tip number 6, let's stay with this concept of wiping, but also incorporate something called rotoscoping, which is basically just green screening out an object or selecting an object and masking it out of the frame. We were kind of doing that with the wipe, but this is a little bit more particular with this shot. So I have these 2 guys going in reverse, jumping across the frame. I saw them making this video maybe for like a TikTok, and I asked them if I could film them doing it too. They're like, yeah, man. So we got a couple shots of this, and if you see, I'm wiping on this shot, and then it cuts to this one. So for typical rotoscoping right here, I'm highlighting these people, so like this, and then I'm adding in these layers. There's some more rotoscoping going on right here. This is one layer, I isolated him, and same kind of concept right here. I'm isolating this artist right here. To give you an idea of how I went about rotoscoping for a lot of these in the moment, there is rotoscoping inside After Effects. In fact, double click your clip inside After Effects, grab your roto brush, and just click and drag along the person. And hopefully it does a pretty good job. And then for me, I hold Option and get rid of what I don't want. Click here, I want that, don't want that. And get his hand in here. And you can make it as fine-tuned as you want. I don't want to make this a big tutorial on how to roto brush, but that's basically it. Right now it's going through, and I could clean some of these things up, but I'm not going to do that right now. What if I went back to my composition? So right now I'm doing that rotoscoping, but if I go back to my composition, here is what that looks like. And it's rotoscoped. So you would go here, File, Export, Add to Render Queue, and make sure that your output module is lossless with alpha. If you don't do that, then it's going to just make this black, and that's not what you want. You want the alpha in there. But another way to do rotoscoping, especially if you need to turn around this kind of rotoscoping quickly, is to use Project Runway ML. This is a website that does a lot of different things, and I think they do green screening pretty well. So right here, I have the footage loaded up of those two guys jumping. And if I go over here to the green screen feature, I'll click that. It'll load it up again. And I like to start maybe I'll start right here. Same concept applies. I'm just going to click what I think it should do. I'll add another kind of points right here, telling it, hey, I want you to do this guy and this guy. And it basically did it right there just for me. And it does a pretty good job. It moves along, and it has basically rotoscoped this for me in the matter of seconds. And all I would need to do at this point is hit export, and then my background color, I do to green screen. I've already done this and exported it, so I'm not gonna do that right now. But how that looks inside Premiere Pro, this is that shot from Runway, and all I've done is just added the Ultra Key effect to it. So if I turn this off, there is the Ultra Key off, and then once you add it, you just take this color picker and pick, here, I'll do it for you, and pick the background, and now I have isolated these guys out of the shot. And how this works is I'm doing a combination of both. I'm wiping and I'm also using rotoscoping. If you look underneath my rotoscope layer, right here, I'm just doing a wipe, but if I bring back on my rotoscope layer, I'm putting that on top. So you still get this little bit in between his arms, which I think is a pretty cool effect. And that is how I would use rotoscoping in After Effects, or you could use Runway to do your rotoscoping. For my next tip, let me talk about the hyperlapse section of my video. And I could really make a whole in-depth video or tutorial about this entire section. So I'm not gonna go too in-depth about how to pull off a hyperlapse, but I'll give you some broad strokes on how I achieve this section of the video. Now, if you are unaware of what a hyperlapse is, it's where you take a photo, you move a step, take a photo, move a step, take a photo, move a step. And how you accomplish this kind of moving time lapse is to bring your grid up on your camera and have the crosshairs hit the same point in every single photo. So if you look right here, I'm actually looking at this little orange mark in every single photo. So let me go frame by frame, and you'll probably not see that orange mark deviate too much, but that's what I'm doing. Every single time I take a photo, I'm trying to line that thing up in my crosshairs. Let's see where we go. I zoom out to a different focal length. So I went from 135 to a 24 millimeter. By the way, I was shooting all this on the A7S III and the 135 prime and the 24 prime. I'll have links to those in the description as well. To do this kind of zoom is very easy if you have my preset pack. I also came out with a video that goes extensively and teaches you step by step exactly how to do this smooth zoom. But if you were to use my preset pack to do this, let me just turn these on. This is the footage as normal. And if you have purchased my preset pack, all you would need to do is look up zoom. So here are all my zooms, Javier Mercedes transition pack. So zoom out A above, I'll put that right there. Zoom out A bottom, that just means top, bottom, and zoom out B. Now these are nested. I suggest nesting them before you apply these effects, and it zooms out just like that. Let me pre-render this. And you have a zoom within a couple seconds of adding those presets. The next tip is a very simple one, but it subtly adds, I think, a lot of movement to your clips, and that's just a very simple push-in. I'll just show you how much I'm using this effect. So right here we have those hands, and instead of just having a locked off shot, which I'm kind of like hand holding the camera right here, but I'm just keyframing in the scale and position to this guy's framing right here. It's just a very subtle scale in from 100 to looks like about 200. This shot right here, again, I'm zooming in as they're doing that action, but this shot, I'm just kind of standing there. I'm not zooming in as they're doing that in slow motion. I just think doing this effect really adds. Let's look at this shot right here. See, the original shot was something like this, but I'm zoomed in on this guy, and I'm gonna take my keyframes right here. I'll have my first initial position, turn on my keyframes, then I'll go in a couple frames, and notice that if I keep it like that, he gets off the center. So I'm just gonna keyframe it so he stays in center, and then I'll do a subtle push in. So I'm at 230, maybe I'll go to 250 and frame up like that. Now we get this subtle push in as we're crossing this guy. And this is the original shot, unscaled, obviously. And this is just with positioning him and scaling in subtly as it goes. It just adds so much more to the shot with a subtle push in. The last two tips I'm gonna group together, and that's adding texture and color to your video. One thing I've kind of held off on enabling is film grain, and I have that on this top layer. So if I turn that on, there's film grain, but on screen recordings in particular, film grain really gets choppy and it doesn't look as good as if you were actually viewing the video. So I'm just gonna show you that, yes, there is film grain on here. I have no idea how that's gonna look on this YouTube video because that stuff gets kind of weird, but there is film grain here. I have a whole video devoted to how to apply film grain to your videos. This one right here, I believe, is from TD Cat Tech, and that one is free. I'll link that video in the description. If you do use a film grain, you would put that on the top layer like I've done right here above everything, highlight it, and you would go to your blend mode underneath opacity and switch it to overlay. And that gives you what you're looking for, as well as if it's too much or too little, you can scale it up, you can scale it down, but I'm gonna go with 75% on the opacity. Again, film grain kind of looks weird if you're looking at it in a screen recording. Hopefully you can see that film grain, but for right now, I'm going to turn that off, but it is in my final export. The next thing, texture-wise, is some of these film burns, kind of light leaks and things of that nature. I'll put a link in the description to a video explaining all of those different places where you can get that kind of stuff. But when you apply a light leak or a film burn, it will look like this. And if you want it to actually show up like it did in my video, you would go to the blend mode and then do screen. And now it will act like it's supposed to, or how you would assume it's supposed to on the screen. And then comes the color aspect of the video. On each clip, there is some color correction going on. All of this was shot in log, and I actually use Gerald Undun's S-Log to Rec 709 LUT. I've used it for many years now. I love that LUT. I think he hands it out for free. Maybe he has a new one, but I've been using that one for a very long time. Some other things though with the color is adding an adjustment layer and then doing a broad pass of what I want the feel to be. And again, I'm going for more vintage, kind of taking out some of that saturation and things of that nature. But I'll just go over here to creative, and I have this Fuji Eterna 250D. That's one, and then I've added another adjustment layer on top of that, and I use another creative look that already comes with Premiere Pro, this Kodak one. And those two together gave me this kind of vintagey look, as opposed to, if I turn these off, then it gets more to a digital, more saturated looking shot. I mean, this looks more like what it would in real life, but let's go ahead and add back in our LUTs here, as well as my Lumetri color. And then we get that more faded vibe or tinted vibe going on. That was quite a bit of information. If you made it to this point in the video, thank you so much. Don't forget to hit that like button. My name's Javier Mercedes, and I hope you're out there living a life of abundance. Bye.